My childhood sucked. It royally sucked. I've been severely depressed since the age of 12 or 13, which I know because it was at that time that I realized I didn't care if I uninstalled right then or not. Neither parent helped much, but my dad is still living in his daydreams of the perfect family. I'll set the stage a little. My mom and dad met at a Christian summer camp. They were both counselors and worked with the kids. My dad was persistent in wooing my mom, even though he is from Canada and my mom is from the USA, Pennsylvania to be more precise. They got together, and at first it seemed like it would be a happy Christian family dream. But my dad wanted his cake and to eat it too. I don't know how it was when I was just born to just shy of 2, but when my brother, let's call him Nathan, was born, I started to notice things. My dad wasn't there for us. He'd always put his church and church friends before his own family. Friends needed help moving? He's there. They need a little bit of money, here, take it. Not like his own family needed money for food, rent, or power. My mom had to take a job just to help pay bills and whatnot, because even as he worked overtime, the money wasn't enough. It didn't help that he would quit his job every year to go to the Christian summer camp. We would literally live at this camp all summer. My mom would help there as well. Then at the end of the summer, we need to find a new place to live. This would happen almost every year. For the majority of my life. Between him losing the ability to pay for the place and my mom trying to get away from him, never separating for long, I and my mom at least have moved 55 times before I was age 18. My brothers were a little less as they weren't alive as long as me or been there from the start like my mom. He was away doing his own thing so often that as a kid, about 7 or so, I tried to ask him to stay home. I tried to block the doorway to stop him from going. He barely paused as he pushed me aside gently, to leave. That was the point where I gave up trying to have him be there for me. Not like he cared. Here's a short-ish list of the highlights. Never there for birthdays for his kids, but wanted something special for himself when the time came. Would spend rent or food money on things he wanted/liked, i.e. glass chess set, fancy desk, new computer, etc. Would eat all the food my mom managed to get for us kids she sometimes didn't eat so we could, and then ask, confused, where the food was for the rest of us. Would actively leave us kids, under the ages of 7 and 5, alone as he went to help church friends during storms or even just on normal days. Got to the point my mom would have to bring us to the college, which didn't have a kids area, so we weren't alone. Would try and police what we could watch and read, even though he was barely home. You know, so it would align with the Christian views. When he wanted to hang out or do something, that's when we'd do something together as a family. He'd take us out to splurge with money we didn't really have and then go right back to ignoring us. My mom knew what and how he was doing things wasn't right. She tried on several occasions to leave him, leave Canada, and live with her mom, my grandma, in the States. But then my dad would promise to be better, to help more, to be there. And she needed the support, so she'd cave and go back to Canada and it'll all start over again. They would fight about his irresponsible decisions and how he wasn't thinking of the rest of us, and my dad would argue that he was helping provide for the family and fulfilling his Christian duties. It got to the point where I was, at the age of 10, tempted to try and stop them fighting. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So by 7 or 8, I didn't care about my dad. He obviously didn't care about us, just what we represented. A nuclear family that must respect him and his decisions. My mom and him decided to try for a third child to maybe mend the issues. They haven't said that straight to my face, but I get the feeling that is the reason. Because why have a kid that is almost 9 years younger than the oldest? Well, instead of helping, it made things worse. My mom now really couldn't leave us alone, and due to issues with public school, we were to start homeschooling. My mom would do math and science, while my dad was supposed to teach more English and history. Guess what subjects we never got? English and history. By the time we were in grades 5 and 4, me and my brother Nathan, we were about 3 or 4 grades behind in those subjects. We didn't know how to write. At all. Didn't know the months of the year. Didn't know a lick of history. But we can't blame my father, can we? He couldn't help that he was so busy all the time. Worse still was that by the time my youngest sibling, born female, is currently transitioning to male, let's call them Alex, was not subject to the strict upbringing that Nathan and I were. We couldn't read or watch anime, manga, Harry Potter, and so on. But Alex can. They could watch things that were obviously about powers of elements, Xiaolin Showdown if you're curious, that would have gotten Nathan or I a stern lecture about how that invites the devil to us, and it's evil. I literally got a 3-page essay from him he found online about how Pokemon names were devil names, and by saying them so often, we'd be summoning the devils and demons. While Alex could watch whatever. Being relatively nice kids, we understood it wasn't my youngest sibling's fault. It was our dad. By the time I was 14, Nathan was 12, and Alex was 5, my mom had enough. They were back to fighting to the point where I took a broken super soaker and threatened him to back off from my mom. Then she went looking for missing rent money and found he had booked them a cruise ticket for their renewal of vows and honeymoon. This was money we needed for rent and food, and he secretly spent it. So she decided to officially and permanently split from my dad, get a new boyfriend, and move back to the USA, into Virginia, and not look back. You'd think this would be end, but no. 2 things to note at this time. 1, my dad decided that my mom wasn't really split from him, they just were in a rough patch. That's right, they aren't and can't divorce. God doesn't allow it. So therefore, she will change her mind and go back to Dad and God. Always great to know your dad thinks so well of himself as to put himself up there with God. 2, after leaving Canada, we were lucky to see him once every 2 years. And always whenever he had something else going on as well. So never just purely to see his family. Surprise number 3, after we had left him up in Canada, he joined a Christian couples group. He told them that while he and my mom were in a rough patch, he couldn't wait to take my mom along with once they got back together. Every year after my mom left him, he sends her love cards on their anniversary, acting as though they will reunite eventually. Whenever she tries to explain that they aren't together, they get into a scripture battle, showing that she can leave, God just doesn't like it. While he'd argue that no, God's word of preserving marriage. When he visits, it's all fun and parties. We go out for movies, food, shopping. He especially dotes on my youngest sibling. So Alex still views him positively. His actions and overbearingness made it so I hate religion. All religion. Others can do it, I don't care. My siblings don't care one way or another, but they are autistic. As a mild threat and to tick off my dad, my mom once told him I became an atheist lesbian with tattoos and piercings. Funniest part is I've discovered I don't care about gender of my partners and barely consider myself female. So bisexual and almost non-binary. I have also gotten a tattoo, but not for anything to do with my parents but for me. And I hate religion. But none of that was firm when she tried to tick him off about it. My youngest brother has within the past 5 years or so, mid-20s-ish, firmly come to realize they were at least non-binary if not a male internally. Took them a long time to tell my mom, but my other brother and I have been supportive. So has my mom, she's come around to where she just wants us to be happy. But Alex is afraid to tell our father because we all know how he is going to react to that. Very, very badly. Recently, he's told my mom, excitedly, that he has a stable job, bloody miracle, and he has bought a house. Yes, that's right, bought. He has enough room for all of us, even me, even if he isn't sure I'd want to move up there to be with the family. He's even renovating it to make it as nice as possible. Had he done any of this 20 years ago, he'd have his perfect little family. Now, he's living an impossible daydream and won't be convinced otherwise. Update. My mom isn't a saint either, he's some backstory about her. Even as my childhood sucked, my mom had to learn and adapt to the religious views and rules of the house. She changed her views, what and how she did rules, and adapted to try and not go crazy or be homeless. But she didn't try to make a solid home for us kids. We were just expected to go with the flow and do as she says, no matter what. We couldn't question her decisions, the rules of the house, or the religion, fundamentalism Christians, extreme Christians, then nothing, then back to Christian, then to Jewish Christian. Yes, it's a thing. If we did try to defend ourselves or argue a point of what she did, we either got reminded of all the times we were wrong/did wrong, or she'd get sad/teary, and that she tried her best for us. In the most public place possible. The worst part is that after we grew to being older teens/officially an adult, suddenly we could discuss things like normal people and actually come to compromises. I'll go over some examples. In the beginning of my mom's marriage to my dad, she and he had similar views of Christianity. A very fundamentalist one. Don't read books of fantasy or magic, no radio that might be bad/have bad words/thoughts, regulated TV if we had TV at all, etc. Problem is, that view was only for us kids. And when my dad asked? She played video games with magic, role-playing fantasy games, watched whatever she wanted, but just made sure to not let my dad find out. But they were both willing to be super strict with us kids, with a deep fear of a literal pit of fire and brimstone and suffering waiting us in hell should we do anything bad, and didn't immediately ask for forgiveness, pray, and never do it again. But adults who did bad things? Meh, it's fine. God will deal with them eventually, maybe. This made for a very tense childhood of being very scared to do anything that could be bad. Something I still struggle with today. But as my dad made life very difficult for us, always poor, constantly moving, difficulty in having food, power, heat, etc., my mom tried to leave him. We moved back to live with her mom, my grandma, and things were relaxed. Suddenly it wasn't so strict. With no explanation to us kids. It's not something that is a one-off. We went back to my grandma's at least 5 different times, with a year or 2 in between each time. So it's not that it was a solid final change. We flip-flopped between loose rules and extreme rules. My grandma would try to spoil us, my abusive uncle tortured us, without the adults really knowing what was happening, and my mom worked, trying to earn money for all of us. So she's gone, less rules, more freedom, and an uncle who thought it was funny to make us kids upset whenever he wanted. When my uncle's bullying got to be too much, and my dad promised to be better, she would move back in with him. With no question or vote from us kids about if we even wanted to. To help show why this is even worse than it seems, my grandma lives in PA, USA, and my dad lived in different parts of Canada. So very extreme moves, with a lot of cultural and schooling differences. Then, as my mom's health got worse, she's diabetic and didn't have the money to get proper help, she would try and get help from my dad in Canada, as she had no healthcare here in the USA. But she didn't try to allow us kids the freedom we had in the States. And since her health was worse, she couldn't take a job, putting us back in the danger zone with my dad, and had no ability to do stuff with or for us kids. So as computers started to become a thing, she would just be home, playing video games, talking with online friends, doing the very stuff she and my dad constantly told us not to. She was a petty revenge person, so whenever my dad and her got into arguments, she would take small bits of revenge as she could. Egging his car, throwing away his prized items that he bought with money that should have gone to food, etc. But this wasn't a good lesson for us kids, nor did it reinforce any of the religious things they were trying to have us follow. On 2 different occasions, she had us move in with people she met over the internet. She never confirmed if she was dating the first guy, but she did for the second. And they had vastly different house rules, religious rules, and overall situations. Again, not a solid foundation for kids to learn the rules of the world, let alone the house, while she suddenly adapted to be more like her partners when she had them. When we moved in with the second dude, he was living with his mom and younger siblings. So not only were we joining a new family, in a vastly new place, but they also had an entirely different religion. Christian Jews. They believe in the entire Bible. So they accept Jesus, but also the Jewish holidays. It was very jarring and added more stress to the whole situation. By that time, I, 14 at the time, was already depressed and detached from everything. I stopped being religious because my mom kept flip-flopping on religion. What she thought, how strict, and now a whole extra thing. Sure, I could understand some of the reasoning, and she is still a Christian Jew to this day, at the time of post, at least 16 years. But to a child, who is trying to understand the world and how to view it. And my mom still didn't defend us. She followed whatever the new house rules said at all times. When we got upset, we had to defend ourselves from these new family members, while my mom worked or played video games. The computer never went away, and she spent so much of her free time on it, it literally felt like she was never available. We, my younger brothers and I, the eldest, had to deal with a whole new set of rules and expectations for another 4 years, until adulthood for me. Then we moved out to be a family on our own, with my mom's new boyfriend, at this time of 4 years, in a house of our own. But instead of making any rules, it was now free for all. Aside from the basic rules of no stealing, no lying, no fighting, and other basic 10 Commandment things, there were no rules. Barely any curfew, but by then we kids were all so depressed that we didn't do anything after school, and allowed our own computers and whatnot. No rules on books, movies, radio, anything. My mom says it was because we were grown up enough to know what was real and what was not, and to make our own decisions. But it never felt like it to me. I had already long been scarred by my childhood, and mistrusted every adult. It didn't help that when she was in charge of the whole household, we still had money issues. She would focus too much on snacks, drinks, and food instead of bills. She'd take money from Peter to pay Paul at times. I had a job and paid rent while living with her. But when I had to pay double one month because she didn't pay the bills, I had decided that enough was enough. I moved out, and didn't even consider helping her for almost 7 to 9-ish years. By that point, she figured out how to be her own person, run the household bills, and unlearned a lot of her bad habits. She had to deal with her own shitty family and take care of her ailing mother, my grandma, who passed away 5-ish years ago from this time, and that helped to make her get her act together. It also helped that I no longer put up with her BS, excuses, or shitty decisions. By standing up to her, and having actual discussions, she's learned a lot about what she did wrong, how it hurt us growing up, and has tried to be better. She is no longer the person I started writing this post about. But by any god or higher powered being or even alien out there, I wish she had learned sooner. There are so many things I've had to work through and are still doing so. If there is anything to take from this, listen to kids. Try to understand what they think, feel, and want. Try to help them get out of the bad situation. Address the situation and don't just sweep it under the rug. And actually explain why things happen. Kids may not fully understand, but it's better than nothing at all. They need a stable, consistent home life. Update 2, 10 years later. Dad sends my mom insane email after 10 years of practically no contact. After my mom left him, she converted to being a Christian Jew. Yes, it is odd. But by then, I was done with religion. It didn't make sense, it could be changed far too easily. And if every religion said they were the one true religion, then no matter what, everyone is wrong and we're all doomed. So I've been non-religious since turning 18, 34 now, as soon as I could no longer be forced to go to churches or reading Bibles. I've since learned that I'm bisexual and agendered, don't care what gender I am / what / how I am called, and since Christians don't typically like that, I've not bothered telling my dad about it. I know he will go on a rant and rampage and rage at me, my mom, and my brothers. I haven't seen my DNA donor in over 9 or 10 years. And he would literally just show up for a day or so, take us out to eat, and try to connect with us briefly, and then leave again. We live in the USA and he's from Canada. He can sort of see what we are doing on Facebook, and what little bits we're willing to tell him directly, but we've not bothered trying to keep the communication lines open. He sent emails to my mom at the end of March, only recently discovered, concerning myself, my younger brother, 32M, and youngest brother, 26M. And it's the craziest thing I've read in a long time. Here is the direct thing, names changed / altered to keep privacy. Dearest, my mom. Where to start? Well, I guess asking for news might be a good start. I've looked at the FB page for her store, and I know she is slowly recovering from the robbery. Has she shared anything with you recently about how it's been affecting her? Has she visited you lately? Does she visit on a regular basis? How well do middle brother and youngest brother get along with her? Now to the meat of this email. As I mentioned for middle brother, I know that Opie made a profession of faith at Abundant Life Assembly, in probably 97 or 98. Has she kept up with the faith? I know that the first time I visited you in Virginia, she was pretty into the whole Messianic Jewish stuff, even showing her friend and I, at the meal after the service, how she had tassels tied to the corners of her jeans, because of it. But I get the feeling she is not currently living for God. I can't pinpoint anything precise for that subjective statement. However, I do know that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, Matthew 12 verse 34, Luke 6 verse 45, and the way she swears does concern me. I first became aware of it one time I was visiting, and we went to watch a movie. She was 1 or 2 rows ahead of us, and you threw a few kernels of popcorn at her, and she called you a fuckhead. I didn't say anything at the time, as I didn't want to start an argument, and I didn't want you to think I was questioning your parenting skills, or anything like that. Then she spent a few years with no contact. I even found her on Yahoo Messenger, and asked her a question I had for her. She answered the question, then told me to not try to contact her again. It was only at your mother's funerals that we spoke again. At that time, she warned me to not be surprised to hear her swear, as she apparently swears a lot, but would try to tone it down for the day. It almost sounded like she was bothered by it, and maybe embarrassed that I would find out, but maybe I was imagining things. Anyway, she told me how when she plays online RPGs, the elf language consists of swearing a lot, and people were amazed at how fluent she was in the language. So of course, I am concerned about her spiritual well-being. Do you know anything about where she stands with God? Another thing she told me that day was that she had wanted to write me a letter, as she had issues with the way we raised her. So she took down my email address to send it to me later. She later lost that email, but took the time to look me up on Facebook, which was an unexpected surprise. I guess she really did want to renew our ties, to a certain degree. In the end, she never sent me anything like what she mentioned, so I don't know what her feelings are on the subject. Did she ever mention anything to you about the way we raised her? Do you have any idea what that might have been about? One more concern I have about her is whether something happened, whether spiritually or physically, at the school she was going to when you guys were still in Montreal. At the end of the 2001 to 2002 school year, she had been saying that if they said she had not learned enough French, she wanted to continue learning. Yet when she went to school the following fall, she came back, during the very first week, wanting nothing more to do with French, and couldn't wait for you guys to leave for the States. Whereas she had asked me for help with homework in the previous school year, now that she was at a new school, a high school, and middle brother was still in the old school, an elementary school, she didn't want my help, and barely put in any effort on her homework at all. She also didn't seem to like her new, male, this time, teacher. So I've always wondered if something happened at that new school, whether in the physical or spiritual realm. Has she ever spoken to you about that? Do you have any idea what might have changed her outlook that radically in just a few days at her new school? I'm worried that if something happened in the spiritual realm, and it has never been dealt with, it may still be affecting her today, on an unconscious level. Any idea? That's all I can think of for now. Thank you for your time. Love always. The whole 97/98 proclamation thing. I was 8. An 8-year-old who had just seen A Thief in the Night series about the end times and the rapture, scared the shit out of me. The 2001 to 2002 thing was me discovering that I was depressed and dissociating. I hated being in a city where you had to learn the language and if you didn't, you were looked down on and scorned. Also, there was nothing for us to do as we couldn't go out, nothing to watch, extreme Christians remember, and no one around our ages to hang out with where we lived. I didn't want to live there, and by the time the second year of being there, I was tired of the whole thing. I stopped doing homework, and technically failed 7th grade because literally every aspect of it was in French, even the art, gym, and math. I stopped trying to talk with him and reconnect with DNA donor when I realized he didn't think women should be allowed to divorce their spouses. Even if the man was abusive or it was to help her, because they should work it out together instead. And when I realized that I did not want to associate with someone who would allow another person to be abused and hurt if their God said so. So my question, do I respond to the email with a full list of what has happened and how I've changed? If I do, this will 200% mean that he will try and convert me back, rant at my mom, rant at me, and be 1000% more annoying. But it would be so satisfying. Summary, crazy fundamentalist Christian father worried that I, bisexual agender atheist, isn't with God and wants to know what has been going on after not doing anything like that for 10+ years. Should I tell him straight up or not bother as he would never change?